Great. So good morning, everyone. So really excited to be here to share some of our work on conversational AI in practice. So my name is Ernest. I'm actually an NHS-based ophthalmologist by background, but currently focusing full-time on conversational AI safety. That's with kind of two hats on. So that's firstly as science director at Euphonia Limited. A lot of the work that we're doing, I'll be discussing here, and also as a postgraduate researcher at the University of York, also looking at building an assurance case for conversational AI. So I think it's quite fitting we had a bit of discussion about kind of self-driving cars. So, with all of the issues around liability, they are here, right? You can go to San Francisco and order a Waymo taxi on an app. And I think kind of framing the discussions is, are we ready for autonomous clinicians? And to kind of get into that, the next 20 minutes, I've got kind of three sections to dig into. First is just kind of sharing what we've managed to do at Euphonia with the kind of Dora conversational agent. Then we'll kind of go back into some of the building blocks of safety, some of the trial data, some of the work in ethics we've done with colleagues here at York. And then the thing I'm kind of really passionate and excited about is sort of the future of the risks and how we can think about safety of the kind of novel frontier AI solutions. So firstly, a bit about kind of our work at the moment. And so at Euphonia, we use AI to automate clinical conversations, and we do that with a kind of agent that we call Dora. So Dora is a currently Class 1 UKCA and CE marked medical device. It calls patients on the telephone and has a kind of natural language voice conversation with them. And so from the patient's perspective, it should be just like a phone call with a human doctor or nurse. So they just pick up the phone and speak to it like they would. Rather than kind of tell you too much more about Dora, I thought it'd be easy just to jump into a demo. This is actually Nick speaking to Dora. Nick's in the back hiding. And this is the kind of actual call that patients get as part of their care. So hopefully the audio comes through.
Hi, I'm calling to follow up after your cataract surgery. Would this be a good time to talk?
Yes, I'm free to talk now.
Has your vision improved as you expected since the surgery?
It's got better, but I'm not entirely happy.
And is your vision clear in the distance, such as when watching television?
Yes, that's okay.
All right. The lens we put in your eye is meant to improve your distance vision, so you will likely need glasses for reading. Your optometrist will be able to help you further. Apart from that, do you have any other concerns about your vision?
No, I'm otherwise happy.
Good. Okay. Is there anything else I can help with?
Yes. Can you tell me if I can go to the gym now?
You should avoid exercise for 1 week after surgery, but you can then go back to light exercise, such as brisk walking, light jogging, and gentle cycling. It would be good to avoid strenuous, heavy exercise or swimming for a month. Did that help answer your question?
Yes, that's fine, thanks.
So just a short demo, just to kind of make it kind of real. So the patients don't see this. This is sort of the quality assurance kind of back-end interface. They kind of have an experience like Nick's having here, which is just pick up the phone and speak. The whole idea, of course, is to deliver these conversations at a scale that is not possible with just human staff. We do a lot of work to try and clinically validate, and we'll share some of that in a bit. And I think that by design, it's delivered. You can access this through a landline as well, so there's no need for even a smartphone. And so the idea is this is accessible to patients. So where we started and what you heard was a kind of cataract follow-up call, which is a really simple kind of symptom-based assessment with some kind of frequently asked questions. But really in the last 2 years or so, we've moved across the kind of ophthalmology pathway, which is kind of beachhead specialty, into supporting kind of patients throughout their care journey. So wherever really a nurse or someone in the care team is picking up the phone and speaking to the patient, we're trying to support that activity. So that's things right at the start of the pathway, from kind of preoperative assessment to kind of referral refinement through to all the way at the end, collecting kind of a patient-reported outcome. So our work has kind of been supported the NHS, and actually this year was picked up by the BBC, and we're kind of growing in terms of the numbers of calls we're delivering. And this is just the numbers of sites we're at. So it's been kind of 2 or 3 years, I think, since we've got initial approval to to use the device, and we've rapidly scaled, mostly in the ophthalmology and cataract pathways. And this is like, I think this next slide answers a really important questions. Do patients like having this as their form of follow-up? So this is consecutive data from, I think, about 6 to 8 of our sites of kind of patient acceptability. And so at the end of the call, Dora asks the patients to give it a score out of 10. And as you can see, the most common score is 10 out of 10. I think this is a really cool data point because the average patient age that are using the system is 75. And so I think it's a really kind of interesting data point about how we can take AI technology, deliver it through a fairly accessible medium to a relatively elderly cohort. So some nice comments there from patients as well. This is this is kind of the reason why I really enjoy doing this is because of the impacts, of course, on patients, but actually also on clinical staff. And so this is a really nice quote from one of the matrons, one of our partner sites. Nurses are being released to do other things in the clinic. We're actually using our nurses as we should. And so the whole aim is to automate the slightly repetitive, stereotyped, often burnout-inducing things that clinicians might have to do in high-volume pathways like cataract surgery. Summarize it, provide kind of the key information, and highlight any recommendations, and allow them to focus on patients who need them the most. So that's kind of a quick whistle-stop tour of what we've done so far. The next section is just about kind of safety, how we thought about designing some of the trials. So there's quite a few different things I'll share here. So just stepping back, this is a diagram we published in one of our papers on ethics, looking at the kind of landscape for assuring AI-based systems. And really you've got kind of the whole life cycle of from your first concept to doing your first clinical trials, to building a model, to evaluating it in the early phase. Of course, regulatory clearance. I think Ankit's going to talk about kind of the post-market stuff, where as you can see, there's a bit of a gap at the moment. But there's actually, it feels like there's lots to think about across the life cycle, and to complicate things, there's also the kind of what you're assessing, and there's a whole bunch of things about safety, acceptability, efficacy, etc. So I kind of struggled to decide what to focus on here. I think I'm going to share some of the work looking at kind of the safety and link it to kind of accuracy, and touch on some of the ethics aspects today. But I just wanted to signpost various things we've done. So this is just kind of double-clicking on a clinical trial that we did about 2.5 years ago. So this was the first multi-site evaluation of DORA for cataract follow-up. It was funded by an NIHR AI in Health and Care Award. It was just published earlier this year. And really we looked at a system in 2 different clinical sites and looked at performance, safety, acceptability, and health economics. And I'll just share some of the kind of performance data to kind of make some of the discussions today more concrete, I think, about performance and safety. And so what we actually did was we had patients who had their cataract surgery, and these are routine, uncomplicated patients who would be suitable for phone follow-up otherwise. They were consented and recruited for a DORA call at about 3 weeks post-op. And DORA does a key kind of symptom assessment and answers some questions similar to the call you heard. And really the recommendations are either that there's no issues, that the patient can continue on to the next steps in their care pathway, or actually there might be something here that a human clinician should probably dig into. And in the trial, they were called back by a supervising ophthalmologist. And kind of across the whole pathway, we assessed these different dimensions. So kind of jumping straight into the kind of outcome agreement. And so on the columns, you can see the supervisor decision, which is the kind of main gold standard comparison, which is an ophthalmologist listening to the call, blind to DORA's decision, deciding, does this patient need to be seen, or does this patient need further clinical input or not? And on the kind of rows are the DORA decisions. And so the kind of green boxes are kind of where the supervisor and DORA agreed. So they agreed that there's no concerns on this call. And in this case, they both agreed that actually someone should probably call this patient back. And in the yellow are basically where the supervisor thought actually there wasn't much of interest here, but the system was overly cautious and said actually we should probably call this person or investigate them. And on the red are where the system thought these are your false negatives, where your system thought actually nothing concerning here, but a human clinician that was listening thought actually there was something potentially concerning. And so, at the time of this study, this gave the system a higher sensitivity and a higher specificity, which is sort of what you want for a screening type tool that aims to pick up as many issues as possible. The overall agreement was really good, and I think if you dig into why there was some kind of disagreement, actually typically were quite nuanced descriptions of kind of post-operative symptoms. So patient was complaining that they had double vision in one eye. That's actually not really concerning for clinicians, but it was picked up. It should be investigated, but the system didn't understand it. And similarly, there was descriptions about their other eye having floaters, etc. Quite difficult descriptions about, I had one eye done, the other one's not quite balanced. And so, in time, we've managed to kind of fold that data back into the AI to get that to classify correctly. I don't think I have time to go into all of this, so I've taken this slide out, but we also looked at a whole bunch of different things that we've collected in terms of things like ethnicity, educational attainment level, income level, gender, first or second eye status, and we looked at whether that correlated to any of the usability or performance metrics, and we didn't find anything, which is reassuring. The only statistically significant thing, I think, was that individuals with lower educational attainment levels found the system more usable, but I think it was not a huge finding. And we also had some health economic analysis there. So this is I know a very kind of brief overview, but it kind of gives a flavor of the types of things I think when we're thinking about conversational AI performance and how we compare them to human kind of assessments. The next few slides are just about real-world kind of safety, and this maybe bridges onto Ankit's talk next about post-market surveillance, and then some things about ethics and kind of real-world benefits of doing this. And so, especially in the kind of first 6 to 10 sites that we were live at, we were very keen to make sure that those results you were seeing were kind of improved on or at least met in terms of safety. And so what we had, this is work led by Aisling Hayam from Euphonia as well, is basically at all the deploying sites we've had, we've worked with the sites to have kind of audits on not just the kind of model performance as you saw, but the kind of real world performance in terms of did patients actually come back in with complications. And I think this is kind of one learning, which is that for this pathway, the key safety metric is something called unexpected management changes, which is where your system has said you're a pass or there's no issues. You've come back in and someone's changed your treatment in some clinically meaningful way, because patients can often have symptoms or signs that don't require treatment, whereas having a very concrete kind of endpoint was what we looked for these kind of real-world post-market things. So this is some interim results. I think we've had more in the kind of multi-site audit since, of about 1,500 patients. And of that, there were about 5 patients who came in unexpectedly to A&E following a pass from the DORA call, and 2 patients who had unexpected management changes from the system. And so this matches really closely to what kind of human nurses get in some of the audits and some of the published research. And most of these patients, didn't come to harm after presenting. They had rebound inflammation treated with steroid drops. And so I think the take-home message here is to work with the deploying sites to do kind of audits to see how your system's actually performing. Because it's good to show performance in 200 patients, but actually much more powerful to see how it's actually performing across 6 sites, etc. This is just to share some of the work that's now coming out, because we're managing to do these calls at scale, which is something that that NICE and the Royal College have been pushing for a while, which is to collect patient-reported outcomes. And so there's kind of a mandate to do this. Not many trusts have the resources to do this, but we've managed to, just basically following up on the patients a few months after their follow-up call, managed to really get quite a high level of completion for preoperative and also postoperative cataract patient-reported outcomes. And this starts to become really powerful because you're able to look at, for say, if you're a commissioner or you're a service kind of lead, starting to look at the impact you're having on patients. So this is one of the 5 questions on the CAT Prom 5, which is the kind of validated cataract prom about how a patient would describe their own vision. You can see, pre-op, most patients kind of indexing around poor or very poor average vision, and post-op you can see that most patients are having a kind of much better improvement in their vision. And so this obviously is important for commissioning type decisions, for kind of monitoring your service provision kind of at a really aggregate or regional even level. And then I think we're also really excited about being able to show this is obviously redacted, but performance of the proms post-op by operating surgeon. So you can really start to see how kind of the patient cohort differs across your services, across maybe different sites you might have. And yeah, just really, I think, cool to see what the data is able to start showing at scale. The next slide, I think I'm not probably going to go into detail of this, but this is some work we've looked at in terms of thinking about how to apply the principles of medical ethics to deciding whether we should use a solution like DORA. So this is work with Zoe, Ibrahim, and colleagues, basically instantiating an argument pattern to look at that. I think I'm going to skip over this because I know Tom and others are going to talk about some of this, but we, from kind of multiple workshops, we looked at the different ethical principles applied to different stakeholder groups, really the groups around an AI system being used. So I think I'll stop on that just to make sure I finish on time. So the next few slides are just about the future. So there's a lot of buzz, of course, about conversational AI and large language models. And I think for me, one of the kind of key turning moments or aha moments for me was this Google paper that came out earlier, I think mid last year or earlier this year, where basically the title, the paper claims that large language models encode clinical knowledge. And I think the most impressive fact about this paper is that with only 40 question-answer pairs worth of kind of additional training data from a general model, they were able to get their kind of medical LLM that they call MedPalm to really kind of approximate very, very close performance levels to clinicians for clinical question answering. So I think that really woke a lot of us up to the potential of this technology for healthcare. Of course, we all know LLMs can hallucinate, can make up things. These are lawyers getting in trouble for using ChatGPT in their legal briefs. And so we thought, okay, what is the clinical impact of these hallucinations in the DORA use case, right? And so we took some of the questions from some of those trials that we mentioned. They were anonymized, consented, etc., and fed them to ChatGPT. This was a year ago, so it was GPT-3 at the time. And we had 2 ophthalmologists look at whether these responses are safe or even helpful to patients. And this is one example of a hallucinatory answer, which is a patient saying, it's an actual question again, one question, I have a slight shadow in my left eye. So for anyone clinical or ophthalmology kind of focused, that's not a good thing. You need to get that checked out. But the system is kind of quite reassuring. It's not uncommon. Yeah, it's okay. Keep it in mind. Take some time for vision to adjust. And so both ophthalmologists in this study labeled this as a potentially harmful response, and I think most would agree it is. And so this is just a whole data set of the labeling on a whole range of axes. So that, it's pretty good even with no. This is not a kind of fine-tuned or trained model. It's pretty good at answering questions and being helpful. But in terms of the kind of likelihood, extent of harm, whether there's answers opposed to consensus, you can see red and yellow indicating that probably it's not quite ready for clinical use in its own state. So in the last kind of 2 minutes, I think I'm just going to share the high level without the details of how you can maybe then use kind of safety principles that I think York have developed actually to think about how to design better systems. And so to kind of ground model responses to make them not hallucinate, you can use something called retrieval augmented generation, which is basically feeding a knowledge source to your large language model to then generate responses. Of course, the issue is you've seen kind of how difficult those responses are to kind of grade. people deploying these systems kind of start by just looking at it and going, yeah, it looks a bit better. That's obviously not kind of a robust way of developing safe systems. We've seen human evaluation, which is what I've just shown and what Google's done, which is great, but it's not scalable. You can't do that for every site, for every kind of conversation, for every kind of iteration of your model. What we also saw was that the kind of off-the-shelf metrics were good, but they weren't kind of optimized for clinical risks. So they're kind of generally looking at whether answers were correct. And so what we developed was kind of a triad of metrics that were specifically looking at whether answers have a risk of clinical harm. And to do that, we applied some kind of safety engineering thinking, looking at breaking down what are the different operating scenarios. This is a bit similar to the self-driving car world, where they look at what situations could your system face. In this case, it's question answering. And then from there, deriving a set of metrics. This is not a lot of detail, but this is kind of familiar to the people here involved with clinical safety work, which is looking at what hazard cases can arise in each scenario. And then developing some metrics, which we then validated to show kind of a linkage against kind of clinical labels of harm. So I'm going to actually skip the next two slides. I'm happy to dig into it later on, but I want to show a 1-minute demo of like how this kind of comes into practice. Maybe I'll show half of it. This is literally me trying out our current system that is actively being worked on last night to see what it does now.
You can go see your optometrist or optician about a month after your surgery, unless you're waiting to have your other eye done. If you need your other eye done, it may be better to wait until surgery for both eyes is done before updating your glasses.
So when is a good time to go to my opticians to get new glasses done? Like I said, the reading is really not great after the operation, so I'm keen to get that sorted out.
It's common to have difficulty reading after the operation, especially if you have a standard lens, which is for distance vision. You'll likely need a reading glasses, and that's entirely normal. As I mentioned earlier, you can see your optometrist or optician about a month after your surgery, unless you're waiting to have your other eye done.
Yeah, great. So this is just to highlight, I think, what this thing is doing is, as you can see, there's loads of things that we deliberately used a not so good transcription model. So you can see there's lots of things that actually didn't hear correctly from what I was saying. But I think everyone's focused on the kind of risks of LLMs, but if developed correctly, with the correct frameworks, it can be shown to be more kind of resistant to different issues. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to stop there. So yeah, ready for any kind of questions or things people may want to ask.
Okay, thanks.